The bell above the diner door gave a small ring as Marcus stepped in, easing the morning chill off his jacket. He was early on purpose. He liked the quiet just before the place got busy, when the cooks could still hear each other and the coffee smelled like a promise. He took the booth by the window because Devon always liked the light there. On the table he set down his old unit cap, neatly folded, and a small paper flag he had picked up from a charity stand outside the VA clinic. He turned the flag stick so it wouldn't roll. Devon arrived with a warm grin and an apology for being 2 minutes late. He tapped his own cap against Marcus's, a friendly little good morning, and slid into the booth. They greeted the server, who knew them by their coffee orders, one black, one with cream and a little sugar. The server wrote the order on a ticket wheel that clicked softly. Sunlight crossed the tabletop in a bright strip and made their mugs shine. The two men relaxed into the rhythm of old friends catching up. Their talk was simple and soft. Devon asked about Marcus's knee, which had been cranky all week. Marcus joked that it only complained when the weather changed or when he had to climb too many stairs, which, in his mind, was the same thing. They spoke about Marcus's niece who had a school debate, and Devon's small garden that finally gave him 3 perfect tomatoes. They both laughed about how small wins can lift a whole week. Their laughs made the nearest table smile, because joy like that travels. They also talked about the VA visit that morning, the forms they filled, and the nurse who always tried to make the line move a little faster with kind words and extra pens. Marcus said he was grateful for people like her, people who made systems feel more human. Devon nodded. He said mornings like this, with good coffee and a friend who understood his history, felt like a second home. The diner had that effect on people: tile floor, bright menus, the soft clatter of plates, and a radio that never got too loud. The server brought their coffee and offered extra napkins without being asked. She noticed their small flags and asked about the event outside the clinic. Devon explained that a local group was raising funds for a community center that would host job training and health workshops for anyone who needed them, not just veterans. The server said that sounded wonderful and wished them a good breakfast. When she left, Marcus and Devon took a quiet moment to look out the window, where bus stop benches held commuters with backpacks and briefcases, all starting a new day. The door opened again with a ring, and a uniformed officer stepped in, glancing around with a quick scan that seemed habitual. He spoke softly into his radio and walked to the counter, where the manager pointed to a corner table. The officer's eyes passed over the room and returned to Marcus and Devon. For a second, his gaze fixed on their caps and the small flags. He adjusted his belt, thanked the manager, and began to move across the dining room with measured steps. Marcus saw the officer before Devon did. He placed his hand flat on the table, steady and calm. Devon followed his look and straightened just a little, not stiff, just aware. The officer stopped by the booth, nodded, and asked if everything was all right. Marcus said yes, thank you. Devon added that they had just sat down. The officer's tone stayed even as he mentioned he was responding to a call about a possible disturbance. His words floated over the table like a draft. Marcus and Devon looked around. The diner was calm, forks and conversations, coffee and toast. "Would you mind telling me why you're here?" the officer asked. His question was clear, but it carried a weight that did not match the scene. Marcus answered plainly. "We're here for breakfast after a clinic visit." Devon nodded. He mentioned they were regulars and pointed with an open hand toward the server, who had greeted them by name not 5 minutes ago. The officer's eyes shifted to the server, then back. He asked if they had identification. The word felt out of place, like an umbrella opened indoors. Marcus kept his voice level. He told the officer they were just having coffee and were waiting to order pancakes. Devon's eyes met Marcus's for a moment, a quiet check-in between friends who knew how to steady each other. The officer asked again about identification, and this time his words included a phrase about proof. The air went still. Not angry still, thoughtful still. Marcus took a breath. He had worked on his patience over the years, and he used it now like a tool, not like a shield. He explained that they were paying customers in a public diner. He said they were wearing caps from their old units because they were proud of the people they had served with, and that their small flags were from a local fundraiser, not from any kind of event happening inside the diner. The officer listened but did not write anything down. He asked if they could show papers to confirm who they were and why they were there. The phrasing felt heavy and unusual in a place where most people showed only a menu. Devon's first instinct was to ask why, but he checked himself and chose a different path. He spoke in a calm tone. He said they were happy to answer reasonable questions and that they would prefer to continue their breakfast without trouble. He mentioned he had a VA card in his wallet, but he did not remove it. It was a friendly, steady sentence, the kind that keeps a bridge from shaking. The officer's posture stayed firm. He said he was just doing his job and that he needed them to cooperate. The manager watched from the counter, unsure if he should step in or wait for the right moment. A couple at a nearby table paused their conversation, coffee mugs halfway to their mouths. The diner did not become silent, it became attentive. Details sharpened, the hiss of the coffee machine, the soft click of the ticket wheel, the ring of a spoon on a glass. Even the sun seemed to slow as a small cloud passed outside, dimming the window light for a heartbeat and then letting it brighten again. Marcus remembered times when a strong reply led nowhere good. He chose simple words. He told the officer they were not causing any trouble. He said the server had taken their coffee order and would return for food. He added that they were not obligated to prove they belonged in a booth where anyone could sit with a menu and a plan to pay. He did not raise his voice. He did not lean forward. He let the table hold his hands so his words could carry the shape of calm. The officer shifted his weight and glanced toward the front door, as if checking how many steps it would take to cross the room. He said that a call had described two men lingering, and he wanted to make sure everything was in order. The word lingering hung in the air like steam near the ceiling. Devon nodded slowly. He said they were not lingering, they were waiting for breakfast, and if anyone needed proof of that, the server's pad would show their coffee order from moments ago. He smiled a little, not to tease, but to show goodwill. The server returned right then with a small basket of napkins and set it down. She asked if they were ready to order food. Marcus said yes, pancakes and eggs. Devon asked for the veggie omelette. The server wrote the items down and told the officer, gently, that the men were regular customers who always paid and often tipped well. The officer listened but did not respond to her. He asked again for identification, this time saying it would make things easier. His voice was not loud, but it reached the tables nearby. Marcus and Devon shared a quick look. They were not opposed to showing who they were, it was the reason behind the request that mattered. They had learned that the why of a question can be more important than its answer. Marcus counted to 3 in his head, then 5. He thought about how he wanted to feel walking out of this diner later, steady, respected, still ready to enjoy the day. He thought about how a calm answer can open a door that a sharp answer shuts. He met the officer's eyes and spoke clearly so there would be no confusion. He said they were here like anyone else, to eat breakfast in peace. He said they did not need to present anything to sit at a table and order food, and that if the officer had a specific concern related to the diner's rules, they would listen and respond. He did not challenge the officer's place. He asked for clarity. He wanted to bring the moment back to simple ground. The officer's jaw tightened in a small way, not angry, but tense, as if a line in a map did not match the road under his feet. His radio cracked softly, a faint sound like distant static. The manager took a breath at the counter. The server's pen paused above her notepad. A couple at the window looked down at their plates, then up again, as if hoping the scene would ease into something ordinary, like a plate arriving or a laugh returning. The officer said he needed to be sure and that he would appreciate their cooperation. The words were polite, but the request still pressed on them. Marcus leaned back slightly, giving the booth a little extra width, and folded his hands. He kept his tone even, not a whisper, not a shout, something solid in the middle. He asked the question that sat at the heart of the moment, the question that could turn the air back to normal if it was answered well. He asked, on what grounds? The question floated between them like a small sign in the air. The officer's eyes moved to the side, the way someone looks at a rulebook in his head. He said there had been a call and that he wanted to make sure everything was fine. Marcus nodded, as if to say he understood the wish for order, then gently asked what exact concern applied in this room at this moment. The officer's reply was careful but vague. He used words like verification and policy, but not the name of a law or a diner rule posted on the wall. People nearby heard the tone and felt the distance between worry and fact. Devon sat slightly forward, palms open on the table. He did not want the moment to turn sharp. He spoke in a way that respected the badge while protecting his breakfast. He said they were regular customers. He pointed with his chin kind, not rude toward the server who had just taken their order. The server, who had been listening because anyone would listen at a time like this, came a step closer and said the simple truth. The two men had been here many times. They were polite. They were waiting for food. The officer listened, and his face did not show doubt or agreement, it showed a door not yet opened. Marcus made a small choice that felt like a bridge. He reached for his wallet without hurry and took out his VA card. He placed it on the napkin beside the salt shaker. He did not hold it up like proof in a courtroom. He set it down like a person sets down a spoon, normal, human. This is who I am, he said, but I want to understand why this is necessary to eat pancakes. His voice was steady. The sentence did two jobs at once, it offered cooperation and asked for reason. People in the diner could see the balance, and something inside the room exhaled a little. Devon mirrored the gesture. He set his own VA card next to his mug and then folded his hands again. He smiled a little at the server, a thank you for standing close. The server, in turn, looked at the officer and said she would gladly confirm any detail about their order, time, items, future plan to pay. The manager stepped forward from the counter, not rushing, just walking with the weight of someone who cares about his place. He introduced himself by name and gently reminded the officer that the diner served anyone who followed the house rules, which were written on a small board near the door: be respectful, no outside food, pay your bill. That was it. No line about identification. No line about papers. At the counter, a retired teacher who came in every morning for oatmeal and a crossword puzzle lifted her phone. She did not hide it or hold it under the table. She held it chest high, with both hands, so the act was visible and calm. In a soft voice, she said she was recording to have an accurate memory of the conversation in case anyone needed it later. The word memory softened what could have felt like a challenge. The officer glanced at her, took in the clear, open way she stood, and then nodded once without comment. The doorbell chimed again as a delivery person brought in a box of fresh fruit. The manager signed for it, then returned to the circle at the booth. He spoke to the officer with the careful tone of someone who knows that good mornings can stay good if words are chosen well. He said the two men were part of the community. He remembered when Devon brought a basket of tomatoes to share with the kitchen last summer. He remembered when Marcus left a thank you note after a busy Saturday when the place was short-staffed. These were small stories, but small stories are the bricks of trust. The officer listened. He did not interrupt. He looked again at the two cards on the napkins and then asked their names. Marcus and Devon gave them, and the officer repeated them, as if trying on a better fit for the moment. He said he had to confirm details when a call came in and that it was not personal. Marcus said he understood the desire for safety. He added that safety felt strongest when it was paired with fairness. Devon nodded and added that the best mornings, for everyone, were the ones where rules were clear and the same for all. The server returned with water and set a small plate of lemon wedges between the glasses. It was a kind habit she had formed on hot days, and she did it now, not as a signal, but as a way to keep the world normal. She asked if anyone needed anything else. Marcus thanked her and asked for extra syrup when it was time. Devon asked for a side of fruit, which made the server smile because the delivery had just arrived. The officer watched these small exchanges and, for a breath, the room felt almost like it did before the first question. At the corner table, a young father was drawing a son in a coloring book with his child. He looked over and then looked back down, whispering something about bright rays. The retired teacher kept recording, arms steady, camera still. The manager stood where his voice could reach both the booth and the officer without raising it. He said again, gently, that paying customers were welcome unless something specific happened that broke the posted rules. He asked the officer if there was any report of a rule being broken. The officer's radio cracked softly. He glanced at his shoulder mic but did not press it yet. He said the call had only mentioned 2 men lingering. The word felt thin in the air, like a thread that could not hold a weight. Marcus took another small breath and said that lingering was a kind word for patience while waiting for food. There was a tiny ripple of light laughter near the counter, not unkind, just the human way of letting a tense string loosen a notch. Devon offered a simple summary for the officer, as if giving him a helpful note to send back wherever notes went. 2 men, regulars, coffee ordered, food on the way, cards on the table, no rule broken. He finished with a sentence that many people could agree with: "We like this place. We treat it like home." The officer's jaw eased a fraction. He shifted his stance and said he would appreciate a moment to check something. Marcus nodded. Devon nodded. The manager nodded. The server nodded. It was a whole family nod. The officer pressed his radio and gave a short update. He described the scene plainly: a calm diner, 2 customers, manager present, no disturbance in progress. He asked for guidance on verification. The word came back, and the old teacher's phone caught it. The room waited. It did not freeze, plates still moved, and the kitchen still sang its low metal song. But the room waited. Waiting is a skill of communities, learned over years and used on mornings like this. While the officer listened for a reply, Marcus and Devon did not waste the silence. They spoke to each other in low voices about the rest of the day. Marcus would visit his niece to hear about the debate. Devon would check the garden and bring a few herbs to a neighbor who was trying a new soup. These were small plans, but they were real, and reality is a strong anchor in a time when words can float away. The server returned with the fruit side and placed it near Devon. She asked, with a tiny tilt of humor, if there was a rule against strawberries. Devon said he hoped not and thanked her. The manager used the quiet to point toward the small chalkboard by the door. He told the officer that the rules were few on purpose, so the place felt warm, and that warmth had served the neighborhood well. People who felt welcome came back. People who came back helped keep the place steady. He said he had learned that certainty did not need many sentences, it needed clear ones. The officer looked at the board, looked at the table, and then back at the radio. The retired teacher cleared her throat gently and said, to no one in particular, that she had seen many mornings like this turn out fine once everyone named the facts. She told a quick story about a time she lost her wallet and a bus driver kept it safe, and how the best part was not the wallet itself but the way hands and voices had stayed kind. The story sat in the air for half a breath and then found a place to rest, like a bird on a wire. A voice came through the officer's radio, faint but firm. It asked for the address, the names, and a quick description. The officer answered, voice low and professional. The voice on the radio said to stand by. The diner gently exhaled again, as if the whole room believed in the power of good procedures done well. The officer said he appreciated everyone's patience. Marcus said he appreciated straight answers. Devon said he appreciated breakfast that arrived hot. The server smiled at that and promised the kitchen was on it. The officer asked one more time, in a way that sounded more like a request and less like a test, if he could look at the cards on the napkins. Marcus nodded but did not push them forward like a requirement. He let them sit where they were, easy to see, settled in place like any other part of the table. The officer glanced at the names and the quiet details and then looked up. He did not hand anything back because nothing had been handed to him. He simply said he had seen enough to understand the present moment. Small winds crept in like sunlight returning after a small cloud. The manager relaxed his shoulders. The server placed a basket of toast on the table without being asked because toast makes many things better. The young father and his child added a second son to their page. The retired teacher lowered her phone slightly but kept it steady just in case, because memory matters most when moments change. Marcus thanked the officer for listening. Devon thanked the manager for speaking with care. The officer said he would wait to hear back and then decide if any further steps were needed. The words further steps did not feel heavy now, they felt like a line inside a process that could end with breakfast and a lesson. The radio hissed again. The officer raised his head a little, listening. The voice asked him to remain on scene and to request a supervisor for clarity, given the nature of the call and the calm state of the room. The officer repeated the instruction and said he understood. He looked at Marcus and Devon and said a supervisor would be arriving. Marcus nodded as if to say, "Good, more eyes can bring more light." Devon took a bite of fruit and placed the fork down gently, leaving room for words if the officer needed them. The manager stepped back to give space and to welcome another customer who had just walked in, because diners do not stop being diners when life visits a booth. The server checked on the kitchen and returned with an update. Pancakes were almost ready. Eggs were almost done. Omelette was just getting its fold. The timing felt like a promise that normal life was not gone, just waiting its turn. The retired teacher, satisfied the record would show calm voices and clear facts, lowered her phone a bit more and took a sip of tea. The officer stayed near the booth but did not hover over it. He placed one hand on the back of a nearby chair, as if reminding himself that furniture is for sitting and rooms are for sharing. He thanked the manager again for the reminder about the posted rules. The manager said rules were like guardrails, they were there to protect everyone, not to push anyone off the road. The officer nodded. Outside the window, a bus pulled up and let people on. Inside, the bell rang as another customer entered and held the door for someone carrying a stroller. The diner, which had been a stage for a careful conversation, became again what it always wanted to be, a place where different mornings shared the same space. The officer's radio made a final soft sound, the sign of a message on its way. He pressed the mic and answered. He asked for a supervisor to come by for clarity on a verification request at a peaceful scene. The room heard just enough to know what came next. A pause before a new voice. A moment to let everyone be seen. A chance for breakfast to arrive hot and for a better sentence to replace a vague one. The air held this small plan like a cup holds water, steady and useful. Marcus folded his napkin across his lap. Devon lined up his utensils so the plate could land without fuss. The manager wiped a dry spot on the counter and set out 2 clean mugs. The retired teacher raised her phone again, not in alarm, but in careful witness so the story would have all the details. The officer stood with his shoulders a little looser and his tone a little warmer when he said, almost to himself but loud enough for those close to hear, that it helps when people speak clearly. The bell over the door rang again. The room pivoted toward the entrance, curious and hopeful, ready for the next step that might turn the morning back to something simple. The bell over the door had just stopped ringing when a small hush moved through the room again. The officer stood by the booth with a careful stance, radio on his shoulder, eyes steady but not hard. He looked like a man who wanted to do the right thing and also wanted to be sure what the right thing was. Marcus noticed that and took it as a good sign. Devon noticed too and let his shoulders drop a little, like a runner easing before the next mile. Still, a question hung in the air: what happens next while they wait? The answer did not come at once. It came in small pieces that could have been missed if no one paid attention. The server slid plates onto the pass for another table, and the smell of toast and eggs floated over, soft and warm. The manager checked a list for the day's deliveries and then tucked the list into his pocket, giving his hands something to do while thoughts lined up in his head. At the counter, the retired teacher kept her phone steady. She did not speak unless it helped. She understood that quiet can be a kind of support. Marcus felt a tug inside, the kind that asks if calm will be enough. Years had taught him that calm is powerful, but it can feel small when someone questions your place at a table. He looked at the small paper flag by the salt and thought of the people who had handed it to him that morning. He thought of a line he liked: name the fact. Ask the next clear question. He turned that line over in his mind like a coin, bright on both sides. Devon felt a different tug. He liked to make plans, even for small moments, because plans gave him a sense of order. He made one now. Step 1, keep voices steady. Step 2, welcome the supervisor with respect and a clear summary. Step 3, find a gentle way to show the officer that fairness helps everyone, including him. That third step felt the hardest and the most important. He had learned that someone who feels seen can change course without losing face. And when a person can keep their dignity, the whole room stays whole too. The officer's radio clicked softly. He listened and said, "Copy," in a low voice. He looked at Marcus and Devon and said a supervisor was on the way. He added that he was still confirming details. The words sounded formal, but his tone had warmed since he first stopped at the booth. Marcus nodded as if to say, "Thank you for telling us." Devon said, "We're here," meaning both that they were still at the booth and that they were present, willing to be part of a clear process. A minute can be long in a room where people are waiting for the next step. The mind fills the space with worries or wishes. Marcus chose to fill it with a memory. He pictured a younger version of himself learning to brief a small team: be short, be true, be kind. He turned to the officer and, in that same spirit, gave a short summary of the morning in simple words. We ordered coffee and breakfast. We are regulars. We are not breaking any rule. We put our cards on the napkins. We're happy to speak with your supervisor. It was a small map of the moment, drawn with straight lines. The officer listened without interrupting. He nodded once at each point, like tick marks on a page. He did not say the word loitering again. He did not say the word papers. He said, "Thank you," which this time sounded less like a phrase and more like a real note of appreciation. The manager heard that tone and took a breath that seemed to settle him from the inside out. The server caught it too and smiled a little. Devon reached for his water and then set the glass down with care. He had another idea, a small one that could lower the temperature of the moment. "Would it help if we pay now?" he asked the manager, not the officer. "We can settle the bill early and keep eating when the food arrives." The offer was simple and practical. It showed trust in the place and in the process. The manager brightened. Prepaying was not a rule, but it was allowed. It reminded everyone that breakfast was the plan and always had been. The manager rang up the order at the register but did not rush. He explained each line with a quiet voice so there would be no confusion later. The receipt printed with a soft scratch. He brought it to the table with a pen. Marcus signed. Devon signed for his own plate. The retired teacher noticed the pen on paper and let out a small sigh of relief, not because money solves everything, but because it showed the story was still about breakfast and not about something else. The officer watched without comment. His face showed thought, not tension. He asked the manager if prepaying was standard. The manager said it was not common, but it was welcome. It's like putting a bookmark in a chapter, he said. We know where we are. The officer nodded. He echoed the word bookmark, as if he might use it someday to help another morning go right. Then came the midpoint that often visits a story like this, the test that asks everyone if they mean what they say. The radio voice suggested that the officer ask the manager to check a minor detail on a security camera: arrival time. It was not a demand to watch people eat, it was a simple time stamp. Still, the request carried a risk. If handled without care, it could turn a calm room into a room of suspicion again. The manager looked at the officer, then at Marcus and Devon. He chose his words with love for his place. We can check the time if it helps everyone feel sure, he said gently, but I will not make my guests feel watched. I can look myself and report the time to you. The officer agreed without hesitation. He did not follow the manager to the back. He stayed near the booth, a few steps back, open posture, hands visible, eyes not fixed on any one face. The room noticed. The retired teacher's phone caught the shape of that respect. While the manager stepped away, the server brought plates, pancakes with a soft shine, eggs firm and bright, an omelette folded like a neat letter, toast in a small basket. She placed them down with a light, careful, hot, the same way she always did. Marcus and Devon thanked her. They did not pretend nothing was happening, they made room for the food and for the process. Devon cut a small corner of omelette and waited, fork resting, until the officer gave a nod that said, "Go ahead." It was a tiny exchange but full of meaning. Marcus's doubt returned for a brief second, as doubt does. He asked himself if the scene would replay in his mind later and make him feel small. He did not want that. He wanted to walk out feeling equal to the room, equal to the rules, equal to every other neighbor. A voice from long ago, his granddad's, rose up in his memory: "Be the lesson you wish we had back then." The line landed inside him like a hand on his shoulder. He decided to lean into clarity even more. He turned to the officer and said, in a tone you might use with a colleague, "Would you like us to write a short note for your supervisor describing what happened from our side? We can keep it to facts." It was a braver step because it made the moment part of a record, but it was also kind because it offered to help, not accuse. Devon agreed and added that a simple note could be useful in training. The retired teacher let out another small breath. She had spent years helping people write down moments so they could learn from them. The officer paused and then said yes, a written note would be helpful. He added that he would also write a note. He looked like a person who had been handed a bridge and was glad to cross it. The manager returned with the time stamp and said the men had arrived, ordered coffee, and sat like everyone else. He gave the exact minutes, not to prove a point, but to honor the request with precision. The officer thanked him. The radio voice said, "Stand by, supervisor, 2 minutes out." 2 minutes can feel short if you are tying a shoe. It can feel long if you are tying together a morning. The room settled into those seconds like a group sitting for a photo, shoulders adjusting, faces steady, patience holding. Marcus took a bite of pancake and closed his eyes for a second because it was good, and he wanted to let his body remember normal joys. Devon poured syrup with a slow hand so the stream looked like a little ribbon. He liked the shape it made. Shapes can help a mind stay soft. The officer took a small step closer, not into the booth space but into the space where people talk. "Thank you for staying calm," he said. The words were simple, and they mattered. Marcus nodded. "Thank you for staying," he answered, meaning he appreciated that the officer had not walked away from clarity. Devon added, "We're neighbors in this room. That should count for something." The officer gave a tiny smile, the kind that does not show teeth but shows thought. The retired teacher decided to add her small piece. She said, "I'm filming to remember, but I'm also here as a neighbor. I'm glad we're naming the facts." She put her phone a little lower, still recording but less like a shield and more like a notebook. The young father looked up from the coloring book and gave the officer a small nod too, the kind you give when you hope a day will end with a good story to tell a child. A shadow passed across the window as a tall figure paused at the door. The bell rang, soft and clear. The supervisor stepped in with a calm face and a pace that said, "I have time for this." He spoke to the host at the front, who pointed toward the booth. Before he reached them, he greeted the room with a short good morning, not to claim it, but to join it. The room answered in quiet ways, a few nods, a soft morning from the counter, the gentle stop of a spoon in a cup. The officer squared his shoulders in a respectful way, ready to explain. The manager moved one step aside so the circle could widen without anyone feeling pushed. Marcus and Devon did not stand up, but they turned slightly so their faces were open to the new voice. The retired teacher lifted her phone just a bit, steady as ever. The supervisor came to a stop at the edge of the booth and took in the faces, the plates, the small flags on napkins, the pen and receipt, the quiet order of a place that had kept its shape. For a small, important second, no one spoke. It was the second where the whole morning asked, "Will we make this a lesson or a scar?" The supervisor looked at the officer and then at the two men. He took a slow breath that everyone could see and said, "Let's hear what happened, one clear step at a time." Marcus felt his doubt loosen. Devon felt his plan solidify. The manager felt his place held. The retired teacher felt the record welcome truth. The officer started with the call. He kept it brief. He said he found a calm room and two paying customers. He said he asked for identification and then asked for guidance. He said the men offered to write a note. He said the manager confirmed arrival times and posted rules. His voice was even. It carried no blame. It carried a wish for order. The supervisor listened with his head slightly tilted, the way someone listens to music and counts the measures inside. When the officer finished, the supervisor turned slightly to Marcus and Devon and asked if they would share their side. Marcus looked at Devon, and Devon gave a little nod. Marcus started with the coffee and the caps and the simple plan for pancakes after the clinic. He said the word neighbor twice on purpose. Devon added that they had prepaid to keep the room at ease and that they would be glad to write down facts for training if that would help the department and the community. The supervisor thanked them and then looked at the manager to confirm the posted rules. The manager pointed to the chalkboard and read them in a gentle voice, as if rules were a poem with only 3 lines. The supervisor smiled at the idea that rules could be that clear. He nodded at the retired teacher, who offered to send her video to the diner and to the department so everyone could have the same frame of memory. The radio on the officer's shoulder crackled once, a soft sound that did not interrupt. The supervisor took it as a cue to speak the next sentence, the one that would set the tone for what followed. He placed his hands lightly on the back of a nearby chair so he was not towering over anyone and said he wanted to make sure respect and policy walked together from this point on. The room leaned in, not with their bodies, but with their attention. Marcus felt the moment arrive, the one where doubt turns into a step forward or a step back. Devon felt it too. They were ready to be brave in a steady way, to speak truth without hard edges, to help the story land on the side of learning. The supervisor's eyes moved from face to face and then settled on the officer again as if to ask a question that would guide the next move. The bell over the door gave a soft echo from earlier, and the room, warm with breakfast and hope, waited for the next clear word. The supervisor did not rush to speak. He looked at each person in the small circle, the officer, the manager, the server, the 2 veterans, and then the retired teacher with the steady phone, and he gave a small nod that seemed to say, "I see you." He pulled a chair slightly toward the booth and rested his hands on the back of it so he was at their level. His voice, when it came, was warm and plain. He said he was here to make sure the process matched the moment and that respect stayed on the table with the pancakes. He asked the officer to walk him through the timeline again, step by step, in simple words. The officer did so, shorter this time, clearer. He said he responded to a call that used the word lingering. He said he found a calm room and 2 customers with coffee. He said he asked for identification and felt unsure about how far to press that. He said he called for guidance and asked for a supervisor. His tone was careful, like someone setting fragile cups in a box so nothing would chip on the drive home. The supervisor thanked him and then asked the manager to confirm the house rules. The manager pointed to the chalkboard near the door and read them again, voice quiet, a little proud, be respectful, no outside food, pay your bill. No long paragraphs. No hidden lines. The supervisor nodded. He turned to Marcus and Devon and asked if they wanted to add anything. Marcus said only that they came for breakfast after the clinic and showed their cards because they wanted calm, not because they believed they needed to in order to eat. Devon added that they prepaid to help the room breathe. The supervisor let a breath out too. He said that in a place like this, paying customers who follow posted rules may sit and eat in peace. He said a call about lingering cannot turn a normal meal into something else unless there is a clear reason. He spoke gently, but the words had weight. He turned to the officer with the same calm face he had offered to everyone else and said that asking for identification can be sensitive and should be tied to a clear reason, not to a feeling. Feelings matter, he said, but facts lead. The officer listened with full attention. He did not try to defend each step. He did not interrupt. He looked at the veterans' plates, at the caps on the table, at the small flags on napkins, at the receipt with the ink still fresh, and then back to the supervisor. He said he understood. He said he wanted to handle mornings like this better. His voice did not sink, it steadied, like a boat finding the middle of the river again. The server, who had stood close enough to refill water if needed, set a small pitcher of syrup on the table and a bowl of butter pats on ice. She did not make a speech. She simply did her job with extra care, the kind that says, "This is still a diner. We will keep it a diner." Marcus thanked her and smiled. Devon asked if the omelette could have a little hot sauce. The manager pointed to a basket by the napkin holder. The small axe gave the room a rhythm again. The supervisor asked the veterans if they would still like to write a short note about what happened. Marcus said yes. Devon said yes. The supervisor turned to the officer and said, "You should write one too." He added that he wanted the notes to be simple and factual, 3 or 4 paragraphs each, so they could become part of a training moment for the team. "We learn fastest," he said, "when we can see the steps in order." The retired teacher lowered her phone a little and spoke in a kind tone. She said she would be willing to share her video with the diner and with the department so everyone had the same memory to look at later. The supervisor thanked her and asked for her name. She gave it and spelled it slowly. He smiled and said, half joking, that teachers always make the world more clear. She smiled back and said diners help a lot too. The officer took in the offer of notes and the mention of training. He turned to Marcus and Devon and spoke without the radio voice, without the careful distance. He said, "I'm sorry I made your breakfast harder than it needed to be." He did not crowd the booth. He kept a respectful space and added, "I should have started with the manager and the rules on the wall. I will remember that." The words were simple. They did not erase the morning, but they lit a new part of it. The air felt warmer, as if a window had opened. Marcus listened with care. He had heard apologies said in many ways in his life. Some felt like closing a door. This one felt like opening one. He nodded. He said, "Thank you for saying that." Devon added, "We appreciate it." He looked at the supervisor and said, "If our notes can help your team have an easier morning next time, we're glad to write them." The supervisor asked the manager for a quiet corner where people could write without blocking the path to the kitchen. The manager pointed to a small table near the front window, sunny and a little away from the main flow. The supervisor said perfect. He asked the officer to stand by the counter and handle any other calls with the radio while folks wrote. He did not send the officer out of the room. He kept him in the circle. It was not a punishment, it was practice. The manager brought over pens and simple lined paper. He did not bring clipboards, the table itself was steady. The retired teacher offered to email the video later that day, but for now she kept filming until the notes were finished, then she would stop. A clean ending helps a story keep its shape, she said, a little to herself, a little to the room. Marcus began to write. He noted the time they walked in, the coffee orders, the first question from the officer, the request for identification, the decision to set cards on napkins, the arrival of the supervisor, the apology, and the plan for training. He kept each sentence short. He did not add heat. He added light. Devon wrote too, in his neat hand, including the choice to prepay, the posted rules, and the suggestion that future calls like lingering be checked against the chalkboard before anyone's meal is slowed. The officer stood at the counter and wrote his own note. He described the call, his first approach, the language he used, the moment he felt unsure, the request for guidance, the facts as he understood them now, and his apology. He did not hide behind big words. He used plain ones. The supervisor read over his shoulder for a second, then stepped back and let him finish. While they wrote, the diner found itself again. Plates came and went. The young father drew a second son in the coloring book and gave it long rays. A couple near the window split a muffin and talked quietly about weekend plans. The bell over the door chimed as two high school students walked in for hot chocolate and shared a laugh that sounded like a clear bell inside the first bell. The radio on the officer's shoulder gave a soft update about something across town, not an emergency. He nodded and answered in a calm voice, then returned to his page. The manager glanced at the chalkboard rules and felt a small idea form. He looked at the supervisor. "I've been thinking," he said. "Maybe I can add a line to the board, all neighbors welcome. Ask questions kindly." The supervisor smiled. "That's a good line," he said. "Rules and invitations can stand together." Marcus overheard and gave a thumbs up. Devon said he liked it too. The retired teacher whispered, "Yes," as if the word itself could plant the line in the wood. The server brought a small plate with 2 extra pancakes, on the house. She set them down and said, "For the writing. Thinking takes energy." Marcus laughed softly. Devon laughed too. The officer looked over and gave a grateful nod he wasn't sure he was allowed to make, but he made it anyway. The supervisor said, "Good call," to the server, and she glowed a little, like a lamp turned up one notch. When the notes were done, the supervisor collected them. He read the first lines of each, not to judge, but to sense the tone. They matched, clear, steady, hopeful. He said he would scan them at the station and send copies to the manager and, with permission, to Marcus and Devon. He asked the retired teacher for her email again and the best way to receive the video. She offered to send it through a link later in the day. He thanked her once more. Then the supervisor did something simple that felt big. He spoke to the room. Not a speech. Just a few sentences. He said, "Thank you for your patience this morning. We want to be good neighbors to you, not just people in uniforms who pass through. If you ever have a concern, please bring it to us with the same calm you showed today. It matters." The room answered in small ways, smiles, nods, a trio of thank yous that rolled in like soft waves. He turned back to the booth. "Now," he said, "you have a choice, and it's yours. We can log this as an informal training note, with the apology and the steps you helped us write. Or we can make it a formal complaint that goes through a longer review. Both are valid paths. One is quicker and focused on learning, one is wider and takes more time. I want you to pick what feels right. There is no wrong answer." Marcus looked at Devon. He did not rush. The pancakes still steamed. The syrup still shone. The morning had found its balance again, but this choice could shape how it would feel later, when the door closed behind them and the day moved on. Devon's eyes went to the chalkboard, then to the officer at the counter, then to the supervisor's calm hands on the chair back. The retired teacher held her phone steady, not to push them, but to honor the next step. The manager wiped a clean spot on the counter as if to clear the air for the decision. The server rested her tray on her hip and watched with the hopeful heart of someone who wants her workplace to be known for kindness. The officer waited with an open face, learning how to wait in public in a way that respected everyone else's time. Marcus took a breath and felt his granddad's hand on his shoulder again, not really, but in the way memory can be a touch. Devon rolled his fork between his fingers once and set it down so it would not clink when he spoke. The choice sat between them like a small box with two keys. They could open either door. They could set the tone for what the word neighbor would mean here, not just today, but next week and next month. Marcus turned toward the supervisor, ready to speak. Devon nodded, ready to add one clear line. The room leaned in without moving. Outside, a bus sighed at the stop and then pulled away. Inside, the bell over the door did not ring. For a heartbeat, the diner was not a place with many voices, it was a single quiet ear, waiting to hear what kind of lesson the morning would become. Marcus spoke first. He said he wanted the morning to teach, not to punish. He said he believed in steps that made the next visit easier for everyone. Devon agreed. He added that he wanted the officer to learn and to keep serving the neighborhood with a better plan. They both chose the training path with their names on the notes and the apology recorded in clear words. The supervisor thanked them, not as a formality, but like someone grateful for a gift he could actually use. The officer let out a breath he had been holding. He said he respected their choice. He repeated his apology in a softer voice, and this time he added one line. He said he would ask to sit in the next community workshop and listen, not speak, for the first half. He said he needed to hear more mornings like this from the people who live them. Marcus nodded. Devon said that sounded right. The supervisor wrote the choice on a small form and told everyone what would happen next. The notes would go into a training packet. The video, with the retired teacher's permission, would be clipped to the parts that mattered most, the first moments, the questions, the reminder about the posted rules, the calm offers, the apology, and the decision. It would be used in a short session called Match the Moment, a title his team liked because it asked officers to notice the room before they named the rule. The manager asked for a copy of the packet too, so he could share it with his staff as a case study in comm service. The supervisor said yes right away. The retired teacher finally lowered her phone and stopped recording. She smiled and said she would send the file after lunch from her home computer. She added that she would also write a small note with timestamps, the way teachers do when they want to make a hard thing easier to understand. The supervisor thanked her again. He had said thank you many times during his visit, and each time it still sounded fresh. The server, who had watched the decision land like a cup set down without a spill, brought 2 small bowls of berries and placed them next to the pancakes. On the house, she said. For a good choice. Marcus grinned. Devon laughed softly. The officer gave a small nod again, and the server nodded back because kindness moves both ways. Now that the choice was made, the room felt different in a gentle way. The edge was gone, and in its place there was a new kind of attention, the kind people give to a story they want to remember for right reasons. The manager went to the chalkboard. He stood for a moment, thinking, then picked up a piece of chalk. Under the 3 rules he wrote a 4th line in neat letters, all neighbors welcome. Ask questions kindly. He stepped back. The board looked balanced, like a table with all 4 legs even. A few customers noticed and gave small smiles. The retired teacher whispered, "Perfect," as if the chalk line had been waiting there all along. Marcus and Devon ate. They did not rush. They let the warm food do what warm food does, steady the body and put a soft edge on a long minute. The officer stood at the counter and stayed on the radio for regular calls. He kept his posture open and his voice level. The supervisor stayed in the diner a little longer, on purpose. He wanted to be there not just for the hard part but also for the first steps after. That, he believed, is when trust begins to grow its new roots. People returned to their small plans. The young father with the coloring book drew a little diner sign next to the son. He wrote one simple word under it, "Welcome." His child traced over the letters with a careful hand. A pair of students finished their hot chocolate and left a thank you note drawn in marker on a napkin. It had a smiley face and a tiny cup of coffee. The server taped it to the wall near the kitchen pass. Good mornings collect their own decorations. When the plates were empty, Marcus folded his napkin and placed it beside the fork. He felt the strange, quiet pride that comes after a hard thing is handled with calm. Devon wiped a dot of syrup from the table and said the omelette was perfect. He meant the taste, but he also meant the feeling he had now, the feeling that a room can bend toward fairness if people hold on to it. They went to the register with the manager so he could give them a copy of their receipt and, later, a copy of their notes once scanned. The manager added a small card with the diner's email address and wrote "Thank you" across the top. He meant it. At the door, the supervisor met them with a firm, friendly handshake. He said that sometimes the best lessons come from small places at ordinary times. He promised to update them about the training session date if they wished to attend as honored guests or simply to know it happened. Marcus said a short visit might be good. Devon said he would bring cookies if the station allowed food. The supervisor laughed, a light sound, and said the station always allowed cookies. The officer stepped forward, keeping his respectful space, and said he would like to buy them coffee next time he saw them in the neighborhood, if they were comfortable with that. It was not a trade for anything, it was a neighbor's promise. Marcus said yes. Devon said yes too. They exchanged first names again and said them like they would say a street name they knew by heart. They stepped outside. The air had warmed since the morning began. A bus pulled away from the stop, and the street made its usual sounds: light horns, shoe steps, a laugh from someone on a phone. Marcus looked at the small paper flag in his hand and then tucked it into his jacket pocket. Devon adjusted his cap and squinted at the sky, trying to guess if the afternoon would stay clear. "Looks good," he said. Marcus agreed. They walked toward the corner to catch the next bus, shoulders easy, steps unhurried. Back inside, the supervisor spoke with the manager one more time about sharing the training packet. He asked the server what parts of the morning were most stressful for staff, and she said it was the not knowing how long it would last. Clear steps, she said, had made it easier to breathe. The supervisor wrote that down. The officer offered to stop by later in the week, off duty, to check whether the new chalk line felt helpful or needed a new word. The manager said he liked the idea of an officer seeing the room without a radio on his shoulder. The officer nodded and made a note in his phone. The retired teacher finished her tea and put the phone away. She paid her bill and left a generous tip. She told the server she had each person's email added to her contacts now and would send the video with a simple subject line so no one missed it. She also said she would write a short paragraph to frame the video: who, where, what, why it mattered. She had done this many times for classroom projects, and she smiled at the thought that this, too, was a kind of lesson plan made for a whole town. That afternoon, the manager took a photo of the chalkboard message and posted it on the diner's bulletin by the door. He also wrote it on a small card and set it by the register. Customers pointed it out and nodded. A young couple asked if they could take a picture because they liked how it sounded. The manager said sure and joked that if the line traveled, maybe the town would start to sound the same in many rooms. 2 days later, the supervisor held the short training session. He kept it tight and practical, just under an hour, so it fit the rhythm of the day. He played the video in 3 parts and paused to ask, "What did you hear? What did you see? What do we match to this moment?" The officer from the diner sat in the front row and did what he said he would do. He listened. He wrote notes. He raised his hand only once, near the end, and said he had learned to check the posted rules first and to speak with the manager in the first minute. He also said the word neighbor made a difference in how he felt about the room. It gave him a way to see people, not just a call number. The supervisor shared the 3 written notes. He read a few lines out loud, small, clear sentences about time, tone, and choices. He underlined the prepay idea as a bridge in some situations and the chalkboard rules as a simple, strong anchor. When the session ended, 2 officers asked if they could visit the diner for coffee on their day off, just to be part of the neighborhood they serve. The supervisor said yes and reminded them to go as neighbors first. A week later, Marcus and Devin returned to the diner on a sunny morning. The chalk line was still there. The manager had framed a small card version of it and set it on the shelf by the cake display. The server greeted them like before and asked about the week. Marcus said his niece won her debate round. Devin said the soup with garden herbs turned out great and his neighbor loved it. They laughed about the weather again because some jokes are good every week. The officer came in, not in uniform this time. He wore a plain shirt and looked almost like any other customer except for the way he held the door for a woman with a stroller and checked the chalkboard as if it were a friend. He saw the 2 veterans and lifted a hand. They waved him over. He bought the coffee like he said he would and asked about the best thing on the menu when you needed to think. Devin said pancakes always help thinking. Marcus said toast helps too. The officer ordered both. They did not talk about the hard parts for long. They talked about the normal parts, the bus schedule that never matched the app, the new mural 3 blocks away, the plant on the windowsill that seemed to grow faster in the afternoon sun. The retired teacher came in as they were finishing and gave a small thumbs up. She said the video had reached the right inboxes and the right hearts. The manager showed them a thank you email from the station and a copy of the training outline. It was pinned next to the staff schedule like a recipe card for a good breakfast. Before they left, Marcus placed a small envelope on the counter for the tip. Inside was a note, 4 patients, 4 pancakes, for a room that stayed a room. The server found it later and smiled, the kind of smile that lasts after a shift ends. Devin added a small potted herb to the windowsill as a gift, a sprig of mint. He said mint liked morning light. The manager promised to water it and said he would name it neighbor on the little plant tag. They stepped back onto the sidewalk. The day looked open, like a book with more good pages ahead. A bus turned the corner. A cyclist rang a tiny bell and waved. Marcus and Devin walked toward their next plans: family, garden, small errands that make a life feel steady. Their steps matched in a quiet rhythm. If someone had watched from the window, they might have seen 2 men who looked lighter than when they came in, not because the world had changed in every way, but because one small place had chosen a better way to be itself. Inside, the diner kept being a diner. The chalkboard stayed simple and clear. The cake display turned slowly. The plant named neighbor took the sun and split it into many green pieces. The officer's coffee cooled in a friendly way while he cut his toast and thought about how to move through rooms with softer hands. The supervisor, in a different part of town, opened a folder labeled Match the Moment and added a new page about listening before leading. The retired teacher filed an email marked done, then went for a walk because good endings are best followed by fresh air. In the weeks that followed, the line on the chalkboard showed up in other places. A barber wrote it on a mirror. A librarian wrote it on a bookmark. A bus driver taped it near the fare box. The sentence traveled because it was short and true and fit in many rooms: all neighbors welcome. Ask questions kindly. People said it out loud sometimes, and when they did, their faces softened at the edges. If anyone asked Marcus what the morning had taught him, he said this: calm words are not weak, they are strong in a way that lasts. If anyone asked Devon, he said this: clear rules and warm hearts can share the same table. If anyone asked the officer, he said this: see the room first, then speak. And if anyone asked the manager, he said, pancakes help, but so do good notes. The diner bell kept ringing for many mornings after. Each ring sounded like an invitation and a promise: come in, be seen, be fair, be kind. And when Marcus and Devon walked by the window on some future day, caps on, flags tucked away, they could see their reflection in the glass and know that a small, steady choice had written itself into the life of a place. That is how change often arrives, not with a shout, but with a chair pulled closer, a rule read aloud, a simple sentence written in chalk, and a breakfast shared to the last warm bite.